The last inductee tonight is student athlete Max Anders. Max was a 1965 Triton graduate. He was a four-time varsity letter winner, earning 2 letters in basketball and 2 letters in track. Max came to Triton High School from Bourbon High School during the consolidation in 1963. While at Triton, Max enjoyed a very successful athletic career in basketball and also in track. Max was on the 1965 boys basketball team that finished its season being defeated by Gary Roosevelt in the Lafayette Semi-State Championship game. He was named to the Indianapolis Stars All-Semi-State team, and he held the record for the most rebounds in a game with 20, and he scored 298 career points. Max held the Triton High School high jump record with a leap of 6 foot 3 inches. This leap in the 1965 regional was good enough for second place and qualified him for the 1965 state finals. Max was also the sectional and county high jump champion, as well as the high hurdle county champion in 1965. Max went on to play basketball and run track for 4 years at Grace College. He earned 2 varsity letters in basketball, where his team played in the NCCAA National Championship game, and earned 4 letters in track, where he was named All-Conference 4 times and also held the high jump record at 6 feet 7 inches. Max also says that this was before the Fosbury flop. And I think you said it would add about 5 inches to your jump. So that means Max would have been jumping 7 feet. Pretty impressive. Max currently resides in the Indianapolis area with his wife and is the pastor at a church there in Indianapolis. And I'm so excited that Max was able to be with us tonight to accept this award. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Max Anders.
As all of the other pictures were being shown of the other inductees, I wondered, what are they going to be showing of me? And actually, this picture right here I have at home, and the first time my son saw it and he saw how short the shorts were, he goes, "Dad." That's the length they were. Well, I also am grateful for my induction into the Triton High School Athletic Hall of Fame. And I'd like to thank the selection committee for including me. I'm just glad, as long as it took, that it wasn't posthumous and that I was around to see it. I'm also happy to share this with my family. I'd like to introduce my wife, Margie, who was swirling around as a cheerleader while I was playing basketball. Margie, you might just wave your hand. And then our daughter, Tanya, beside her, our son-in-law, Philip, and our son, Chris. And then, of course, you already know that Kurt and his wife, Kathy, are with us, and their family with Nick and Deborah and family friend Bailey. And my brother would be here, but he and his wife, Geraldine, are on their way to Arizona. Kurt beat me into the Hall of Fame by many years for many good reasons. He's really the premier basketball player in our family. Well, I wasn't quite sure what to say in an induction ceremony, so I went to the internet and I Googled it, and I saw very quickly that there wasn't any pattern to it. And I thought, well, you might thank some people who helped you get there, and you might tell an interesting story or two and hopefully stop talking before the people stop listening. And so I wanted to tell 4 stories connected with 4 lessons that I learned, beginning with athletics at Triton High School. I think it would be appropriate if you were here to thank our basketball coach at the time, Tony Newell. Tony is no longer with us, but Tony came my my junior year at Triton. And then after that first year, he challenged us all to, over the summer, go on a serious physical development program. And you have to understand, it seems really archaic now in the day of Amazon and so forth, but back then it wouldn't have been an easy thing to get a set of barbells, and I wouldn't have had the money if it had been easy. And so he showed us how to take a 5-gallon bucket and pour 30 pounds of concrete into it and stick a plumbing pipe in one end. And then when that was set, you turn it upside down and stick that in another one, peel the 5-gallon buckets off, and you had a set of concrete barbells that weighed 60 pounds. And then he encouraged us, he gave us this sheet of all body exercises to do, and then told us to run certain miles, a number of miles up and down the roads, dribbling a basketball, one going out with dribbling with the right hand, coming back with dribbling in the left hand. And I didn't know any better, so I did it. I did it all. And at the end of that summer, I was transformed physically. Now, it seems self-evident now that basketball players are made in the summer and displayed in the winter, but we didn't know it back then. We were just sort of catching on. And the difference in my athletic performance was night and day. And I am tremendously grateful to Tony Newell for setting a very high standard for me, for challenging me to go beyond my initial horizons and to be able to do things that I didn't realize I was able to do. And so I learned right then, that first lesson, it's kind of a double-edged lesson, is for myself, the value of hard work. That hard work can be the difference between success and failure, or hard work can be the difference between mediocre success and greater success, and that it's almost impossible to overstate the value of hard work. And then the flip side of that is that when we influence other people, the value of challenging them to hard work and challenging them to be more than they are and more perhaps than they thought they could be, but at the same time, as Tony did, to give them the tools to be able to do it. The second story, and I debated whether or not to tell this story, but I overheard Mike telling something earlier when we were talking, and I decided it was a good thing. I'm going to tell this story. I was not a good in anything related to mathematics when I was in high school. And I am not good related to anything in mathematics today. And as an adult, as a student at Triton, I think it probably was in our sophomore year, took Algebra 1. In our junior year, took Geometry. And in our senior year, took Algebra 2. Well, in algebra, I didn't get algebra at all. And I got straight C's in Algebra 1. And then, instead of going into Algebra 2 the next year, we went to Geometry, which the only thing it really did for me was give me an entire year to forget what I'd learned in Algebra 1. And so I went to Algebra 2, which is my senior year, and there were at the time, I don't know if it's the same way now, but there were six weeks grading periods in the year. And in 5 of those 6 weeks grading periods, I got D's. And in one of them, I got the F that I should have gotten in the other 5. But the gentleman who did that structured it in such a way that the F didn't keep me from playing basketball or running track. I didn't catch on until later. A friend of mine made that observation, and I thought, I think that's absolutely right. But my algebra teacher, whose name shall remain nameless out of gratitude for his contribution that he made to my life, worked that out, which enabled me not only to play basketball and run track my senior year, but also allowed me to graduate by the hair on my chinny chin chin without having to take another course, and enabled me to get into college, again by the hair on my chinny chin chin. I went on to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and my doctor's degree, all without taking another single course of having to do with mathematics or algebra. In the ensuing years, with the help of my wife, who was a very careful mathematician, and tax advisors and business managers and other assorted individuals, I have survived reasonably well. If my algebra teacher had not done this, it would have shuffled all the cards in my deck. I wouldn't have played basketball, I wouldn't have run track, I wouldn't have gotten into college, and it's difficult to predict where this would all have ended up. And years later, I categorize this as having been a very good thing he did. The reason I was so bad at mathematics is because my older brother Richard had hogged all the mathematics genes in our family. He was a whiz at it. After he graduated from high school, he went into the Navy, and he was teaching at the Great Lakes Naval Base up in Chicago, and he was teaching in electronics, and he was there for a while and did some other things and eventually made it back to Bourbon. But we were at one family get-together one time, and it was raining cats and dogs. And I made some comment about, I wonder how much rain this is. And he said, well, let me think. And off the top of his head, he said, it takes this many gallons of water to float a battleship. He said, Marshall County is this big. If it rained 2 inches this afternoon, and he multiplied 2 inches times the size of Marshall County, and said that it would have amounted to this many gallons of rain, which would have floated approximately 3 battleships. He did all of that off the top of his head in the space of about 60 seconds. What hope was there for me? So I blame him for being bad at mathematics, but I would say, teachers, if you have ever given your students the benefit of a doubt when it comes to grades, I want to encourage you with the possibility that it may have done more good than you will ever know. I became a Christian the first year after high school, and then I went to Grace College on an athletic scholarship, a very good experience for me, which led to seminary, which led to my doctoral program, which has led to a lifetime of ministry. And I often think of how very different things might have been had that gentleman not extended some very important grace to me. And so my second lesson that I learned was to be careful to extend very important grace to others. My third lesson came from perhaps my greatest memory of Triton High School athletics, which was our team's advancement to the final game of the semi-state. Hal and I were reminiscing when he first got here, and we were reminiscing by this and trying to check my memory. I asked him a few questions, and his memory of these details was quite different from my memory. And so I'm going to share you my memory, and I told him, Hal, if I say anything that doesn't stack up with your memory, don't say anything, just let it go. And so here it is to the best of my memory. This is back when there were no divisions. We were all thrown in together, and Davids often played Goliaths, and occasionally Davids won, as in the movie Hoosiers with the team in Milan. And we had drawn a weak path in the bracket. Combined that, and then we combined that with a little bit of luck so that we met up with Gary Roosevelt in the final game of the semi-state tournament. It was all hoopla and hooray. It was just like the movie Hoosiers, with all the stores downtown painted up with go-get-'em signs, and cars caravanning with the bus to away games, and deafening contests being played in Cracker Box gyms. And then we went on to beat Winnemac to win the regional, and we beat Wheatfield to win the first game in the semi-state, and finally there we were getting ready to play Gary Roosevelt, with bands playing and television announcers speculating whether or not tiny Triton stood a ghost of a chance of beating powerhouse Gary Roosevelt. And frankly, we didn't know. We had won some other games that we shouldn't have won, or at least we weren't expected to win, so we frankly didn't know if we could beat them or not. But when we took to the floor and we looked at the team on the other end of the floor, admittedly, our confidence was shaken. They were huge, and they were quick, and they were fabulously athletic. We learned later that 2 of them went on to play Division I basketball in college, and I think possibly the son of them later went on to play professional basketball. I don't know, but it was a very distinctive name. And years ago, there was a man named Crudup playing in the NBA, and that was the name of one of the men on the Gary Roosevelt team. So Coach Newell got us in the huddle and said, guys, we're going to hold the ball. If they don't have the ball, they can't score. And so we clapped our hands and yelled, "Go Triton," and ran out onto the floor. And frankly, we did pretty well, as my memory serves it, in the first quarter. We led a couple of times and were close at the end of the first quarter, but then in the second quarter, things began to deteriorate. And by the end of the first half, writing seemed to be pretty much on the wall, and the second half even got worse. On the second half, in the halftime, Tony said that you have to hold the ball and run the clock out. They can't score if they don't have the ball. So we tried to hold the ball, and they took it away from us. He said, when they get within 25 feet of the bucket, I want you to be all over them. When they got within 30 feet of the bucket, they drained it. Eventually, everyone was just cringing and waiting for the game to be over, and in the end, they annihilated us something like 103-67. But I can tell you this, that after the humiliation subsided, that thrashing has become one of the highlights of my life. We weren't supposed to be there, so just being there was a triumph. And so that was one of the first times in my life that I learned this next lesson, and that is, play to do your best and let the results take care of themselves. If you do your best, you can hold your head high, regardless of what the scoreboard says. Success is not measuring yourself against someone else. If you measure yourself against someone else and they're better than you are, you end up demoralized. If you measure yourself against someone else and they're not as good as you are, you end up being falsely exalted. If you measure yourself by yourself, then you know what success is. You measure yourself against what your own potential was and try to achieve your own potential. And then, finally, I learned this lesson. Don't let failure carry over. Leave it in the past. Forget it except for the lessons learned. Each day is a new day and an opportunity to start over. So set your goals. Get the help you need because no one can succeed at anything significant without help. And then number three, I said I wasn't good at math. And number three, never give up. It's that simple, never give up. The person is not a failure who falls down. The only way we can fail is if we fail to get up. And so, for all of these very, very good reasons, which all started right here at Triton High School, I cannot imagine what my life where my life would have been had I not had the opportunity to be involved in athletics at Triton High School. And so for that reason, I'm more indebted to Triton High School athletics than I can really imagine. And so thanks again to the selection committee for this honor, and thanks to all the rest of you for sharing it with us.
You know, being the athletic director for the past 10 years, I've had a lot of amazing experiences, but one of the most awesome experiences that I've had was recognizing the 65 team that Max was talking about that Hal played on a couple years ago. We were able to hold that banquet at the old gym, which is where they would have played. But the coolest part was at the end of the evening, they asked me if I would bring a couple basketballs. And we did, and those guys shot around, and I tell you what, Max still had it. He was pretty good. That was an awesome experience. Max, thank you for sharing those lessons with us this evening, and I just thank you for your dedication and commitment, and congratulations.